Borough Mechanicsburg Council meeting of March 15th in order. And we have several young gentlemen here from Troop 300 from Mount Olivet Church in Shermantown. If they don't mind, I would like to have them lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
President Whitcomb.
Here.
Vice President Winchell.
Here.
Councilman Anthony.
Present.
Miller. Hellman.
Here.
Stoner.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Mayor Ritter.
Here.
Solicitor Coin. Here. Engineer Rogowski.
Here.
Chief Myers. Here. Chief Seekers.
Here. We have guests for the presentation of the Recycle Rights Reward.
They want us to come up.
I'll try to stay out of your shot.
Tonight's winners of the Recycle Rights Reward, Donald and Joanne Lauber. Their gift is a $50 gift certificate from Giant. The Laubers were praised for recycling the materials specified in the borough's recycling regulations and nothing more. The curbside recycling bin was observed during a fourth quarter 2015 neighborhood survey of recycling conducted by volunteers of the borough's Recycling Advisory Committee, 3 of which are standing here for you. The Laubers' address, as well as the addresses of others observed with perfectly prepared recycling bins, were entered into a drawing and selected for the award. The Laubers joined 15 other Mechanicsburg residents recognized with certificates and prizes. And we thank them for being environmentally conscious and for making Mechanicsburg a good place to live. Congratulations.
Okay. Now for an exciting MS4 educational outreach.
Give me a better lead in that, Rod.
By Engineer Rogowski. It is very exciting. Go to everybody.
Thank you. For those in the audience who don't know me, my name is Greg Rogowski. I'm the borough engineer. And this evening, as part of our annual requirement, we have what's called an MS4 permit, which, as you can see here, stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. We kind of have to do this every year, so certainly many of the council members have seen this before. So I just ask that you hang on with me. And for maybe new councilman, member Anthony, if you have any questions, feel free to stop at any point during the presentation. So MS4, what exactly is it? It's a permit issued to the borough for stormwater discharges, very similar to the fact that we have a sewer treatment plant that treats our wastewater that comes from our toilets and tubs. We now have a permit that actually is issued to the borough to regulate discharges of stormwater. And that's specific to point discharges, meaning where pipes basically end, where the water comes out of a pipe and goes to some location. It is an extension of the Federal Clean Water Act, regulated by the EPA. Actually, they have handed the ability, the authority to regulate these things down to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. We're going to talk a little bit about the disconnect that exists between the EPA and DEP and some of the very, very recent, within the last 3 months, issues that have come about related to that. So, one of the big issues and big misnomers is that MS4 is specific, it really is intended to address water quality. Of course, in the borough, we have a lot of rate issues, specifically flooding issues. And really, the MS4 regulations that we talk about these things, while they're related to that, they are not intended to actually be addressing flooding issues. That's an entirely different piece of the puzzle. But once again, it is related. Flooding causes erosion and some other things that are bad with respect to water quality. As I mentioned, it's not intended to control flooding or erosion. That's a separate issue, and we have ordinances to control those things. And certainly it's not without cost implications. As the members of council sit here today, really your role is to try to take in here and hear what our requirements are. And there's a hefty price tag that comes along with what these requirements. It's, for all intents and purposes, an unfunded mandate. There is no assistance to do these items, so really that comes from a source within the borough, whether it be the general fund or some other creative financing avenues, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's not to be ignored. EPA, even though DEP has come in and obviously regulated the program, the EPA is Big Brother. They do come around. Fortunately, we have never been audited by the EPA. And there have been audits. York City, for example, is one example, and they got fined upwards of $75,000 at the end of the day. So there are certainly communities that have been hit with this fine, and in the future we can expect that that's going to happen more often. Specific to Mechanicsburg, we are in what we call year 3 of our permit cycle. 2 years ago, we had a permit issued to us. That was really the second round of permits that we had, so 10 years prior to that even, so the last 13 years we've been under this regulation. But what exactly is required with this regulation has changed over that period of time. And part of what we're going to talk about tonight is what's coming up in the next permit cycle, 2018 and beyond. Really in our case, the entire borough is within the regulated area. There are some communities where pieces are in and pieces are out. And both of the receiving streams, specifically Cedar Run and Trindle Spring, are considered impaired in the eyes of DEP, so they're considered to be polluted. This is just an example map of the borough. We have a number of different drainage areas where our water ends up going. About the south half of the borough tends to go to Cedar Run. The north half essentially drains northward and runs out of the borough into Hampton Township to various degrees. Our permit requires that we address 6 minimum control measures. I'm not going to read every single one of them. But these are the 6 items, basically the 6 bullet points that DEP has requirements for each as to how we address these. And very quickly, we're going to review each of those items. The first is public education and outreach. Essentially, the idea is that the more that we, as the borough, can get to the public via this forum, via other forums, and let them know what these requirements are and why these requirements exist, the more of a chance that the public in general will follow the requirements. And they have this pyramid diagram that they typically show that once you talk about it for so long, it begins to sink in, is essentially the idea. So we've been doing it for 13 years. We've been following DEP's guidance, and I should add that in 2015 we were audited by DEP, and we came out with flying colors. We did very, very well in the audit. And we had one minor issue that was addressing a stockpile at the municipal building, at the highway garage. So we are compliant with DEP's requirements. What makes myself and other engineers nervous is that we don't believe that there's really a good connection between the EPA, what they expect out of DEP, and what DEP is telling us at the moment. And once again, we'll talk about that a little bit later as to how that's going to impact us in the future. But basically, we have a public education plan. We identify target audiences, who we should be talking to, business owners, nonprofit organizations, people that own gas stations, things of that nature, where the potential for pollution could be generated on those lots or come off of those lots. And we distribute educational material that's available at the borough in order to meet the requirements of that plan. We also like to have public education and participation, and we have a public involvement plan. One of the issues that not only is covered under the borough code, but also this permit, is that if we do any kind of stormwater regulations, we have to make the public aware, via a public notice process. We have to conduct public meetings. That's what we're doing here tonight, for them to be able to comment on those regulations. And that's all part of this written public improvement and participation plan. I'm glad the Boy Scouts are here this evening. It's actually fitting. They're one of the, they're the gold standard when it comes to some of this public education things that are identified. That's a group that has the potential of making a difference, through service projects and other type of involvement. And they're just one example of where we can reach out and see what they may be able to help us. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. This is a program where we're required, as borough employees and other people are out in the street. If you see something going bad, and it's pretty common sense of what we're talking about related to somebody dumping something down a storm drain or things of that nature, we need to respond to that. Or if we get a complaint and somebody says, hey, there's green water coming out of a storm sewer pipe, the borough has an obligation to go out there and actually look at that and try to find out where the source of that potential pollution is. Right now, under DEP's requirements, we are only required to screen our outfalls, a quarter of them every year, once a year. And, you know, from a realistic, practical standpoint, you know, if I go out one day in a year and don't see anything, I've met the DEP requirement. Am I really reducing pollution that way? Probably not. So that's one example, once again, of this disconnect between, you know, how we implement the programs of what's the requirement and what actually EPA is going to be looking for in the future. We have a storm sewer map. That's been developed over the last several years. That way the road crew, as they're out doing their work, can identify different areas of the borough that could be of concern. If they do see something, you know, they have the ability to be able to track that throughout the storm sewer system to figure out where that may be coming from. Minimum control number 4 is related to basically construction water that's coming off. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Conservation District that basically takes care of that, which is good. So they really enforce that component of our program for us. It's still our obligation, if we receive complaints, that we need to pass those complaints on to the Conservation District as they come in. Number 5, post-construction stormwater management. We do have an ordinance that addresses this. Once again, we are fortunate we really do address these items with respect to our ordinances. As we move into the future, however, and there's future revisions to our subdivision and land development ordinances and our zoning ordinance, part of our permit requirement is that we look at whether or not there's low impact design features that can be implemented. Legacy Park's a good example. There are certain components of that subdivision that, for example, narrower streets, that speak to low impact design. The whole idea is to reduce the amount of impervious area that you're creating and keeping it to the minimum that you need and not necessarily what was believed to be good in the past. So we're trying to balance water quality with functionality, and those two things tend to fight each other. Pollution prevention and good housekeeping. This essentially is within the borough itself, the borough staff, the borough facilities, that we take a role in leading the charge with respect to pollution prevention, keeping our facilities clean, and also making sure that the guys and gals on the street are aware of what this permit's all about and what their responsibilities are. Clearly, they're probably out roaming around much more than anybody in this room, so as they see things that occur, who do they report them to and how do they get handled as they run up the chain of command. Some of the big issues related to 2018, as we get to the end of our current permit cycle and move into the next one, we will apply in 2017 for a 2018 permit, and there are some big changes coming down the road. One of the biggest issues is if you're found to be not in compliance, basically what we call a general permit, which is kind of a easier permit to get, will not be afforded to you. So you have to go through an individual permit process, which requires many more steps. So it's basically, you know, it's retribution for not complying with the current ordinance. They're going to make it go through a more stringent process to make sure they're meeting the requirements. So that could occur in 2018. There's going to be a requirement for additional public involvement as we move forward. And we're going to update our list of authorized stormwater discharges. Our ordinance currently suggests that there are certain things that are allowed to go in the storm sewers underneath this permit. We're talking about firefighting activities before. You know, for example, if we are not going to stop the fire department from discharging their water into the storm sewer, that is an authorized use of the storm sewer system. One of the ones we run into a lot, and Roger and I were talking about this just the other day, currently dechlorinated swimming pool water, people that pump their pools or pool covers off, is allowed to go to the stormwater system as long as it's dechlorinated. They're going to remove that in 2018. So we're going to have an obligation under the permit to actually regulate that. It's going to be interesting. That's a pretty tough nut to regulate. So we'll have to figure out how we're going to take care of that. We're actually going to have to implement pollution control measures. They're going to have hard numbers available to us, which is a good thing, because in the past they didn't have these hard numbers as to goals that we're going to have to meet. The unfortunate component is that along with a pollution control measure comes a cost. So these are hard improvements that we're going to have to make. To a certain extent, we've looked at some of these before, we've talked about some of these before, but the actual implementation of them, I believe, is going to become much more apparent to us. And I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, we submitted we call it a pollution reduction plan for the borough. It's been sitting at DEP for 2 years. It's never been approved. Okay, and in theory, in 2017, we were supposed to start on making some of those improvements. Well, I don't think anybody in the right mind is going to advise you to proceed with those improvements if the plan hasn't been approved. So that's typical of other communities that we've talked to in the area. So really, some of the stuff's going to DEP, and it's just sitting there. It's not being moved forward. Updated mapping. One of the big pushes, and it's has two pieces to it. That they want to have a very comprehensive map of the borough and where all the stormwater goes to. We have a decent map. It's an okay map. Really probably to comply with what they're looking for, we're going to have the borough surveyed, okay? And that's done via aircraft, flies over, takes pictures. That's reduced to a plan. We investigated this a couple of years ago. The cost was about $65,000 to do the mapping. Not sure exactly how they're going to read that, but that's a potential example of how much we could be looking at just in, not even improving anything, just providing that expenditure to be able to have the map so that we can comply with the requirements. So that's order of magnitude type of things that we're talking about. And that's the tip of the iceberg. And the last component, this is a new one that has been talked about. They in the past have always said we should always have a line item in our budget for MS4 compliance, which we do have, I believe. It also speaks specifically to staffing those positions, identifying individuals that will be responsible for that, and what their role is within the community. So I think we can anticipate in the future that you're going to have an individual, whether it be within the current Public Works Department or outside of that, that's responsible for just this. Many communities have that, certainly the larger communities do, but as this new permit cycle comes into effect, I believe that's going to be, it's going to be more onerous on an individual or, to do that kind of on a part-time basis. They're going to have to be out there, more full-time than part-time, I guess is the way to put it. So. I mentioned we have this Chesapeake Bay pollutant reduction plan, and when we did it 2 years ago, there was a statewide plan that was out there that said we needed to meet certain goals, and those goals are listed on the slide. And as I mentioned, some of those goals had to be achieved by 2017 and some by 2025. And that was basically a guidance document. It didn't have any regulatory teeth to it. And we based our plan based on the guidance that was given to us. But it sounds like that they are actually going to come out in the next permit cycle and say, you must meet certain goals. The only good news coming out of that is, unlike the 40s and 50% reductions that are listed in the original guidance document, the next permit cycle lists reductions in the 5 to 10 range, so much lower than the actual statewide plan. Common sense would tell you, though, well, if we're only required to do 5 to 10%, how would we ever get to these goals? So that's where that disconnect once again comes in. Is this going to be enough in the eyes of the EPA? We will, in the future, have to look at certain things called best management practices, and basically what these things are items that are installed in the ground or improvements that are made to catch us up for all the impervious that we as the borough have today that isn't regulated. Clearly a pretty hefty task. There are things called storm scepters. That's what this picture is. It's a big giant vault that basically collects all the garbage in the bottom of it when the stormwater runs through it. Of course, the downside is A, they're expensive to put in. B, they're very large with respect to the drainage area that goes to them. And C, on a very regular basis, an individual is going to have to go down there and clean that thing out. Fortunately, we do have a vac truck that is available to do that, so we have the equipment. But it's yet another thing to add to the list of things that the Public Works staff is going to have to do.
Excuse me, sir, would that fall under the duty of the new Public Works position opening up? Or would that be a separate duty?
I don't believe
Their
that.
advertising position on
I can't speak to that specifically, but I believe that's separate. Separate. Stormwater basin retrofits. We talked about the north side basin, for example, is one of the only areas in the borough that we have to work with. We could potentially do something with that to achieve this goal. Some individual little areas of infiltration spread out amongst the borough. They're harder to control with respect to maintenance. And the one bright side that we do have going for us is that you, as a council, invested a pretty significant sum of money in your sewer treatment plant several years ago. And currently it's operating better than our permit requires us to. So there's the opportunity, although it hasn't been really flushed out how it will work, that we'll be able to take some of the credits that we don't use underneath our permit and apply them to stormwater, which is good. They just haven't come up with a way. They do it with sewer, so we as a municipality can trade our credits to another municipality that's not meeting their requirement, but they haven't come up with a way to cross that path between the sanitary sewer and the storm sewer yet. We're hoping that occur, because that would be very big for us. We would be able to continue to utilize what we already have in place to meet some of our requirements. So we're hopeful that is a good thing.
Greg,
Yes, sir.
could those storm scepters actually slow the disbursement of water so that flooding would get worse?
How they're designed is up to a certain flow, the debris would drop down in, but after a certain amount of flow, basically it just flows right through them. So they're not intended to block the flow or restrict the flow of the water because they just are they call it the first flush. Typically the first hour's worth of rain or the first 2 inches is where all the pollutants occur, and after that it's not clean water, but it's much cleaner water. So they're not so worried about that second pass of things. So, and here's some photos related to what basin retrofits and bioretention look like. They're big, wet, marshy areas at the end of the day. Clearly, people don't like big, wet, marshy areas. So we have the public perception of what's out there, what we intend to do, and the permit requirement to resolve as well. And that's going to be a challenge. I think North Side's a perfect example of that. If we put something in there that's very similar to this, we're going to get complaints. So we need to balance those requirements with the cost. It's much cheaper to do something to that basin than a storm scepter, but at the end of the day, maybe public perception will prevail in that regard. So, the cost. What are the costs? We're easily putting $15,000 to $25,000 a year currently into staff time to do our current requirements. With the requirements getting more stringent in the future, that number will go up. Some of those costs are obviously part of other budgets, I'll say, related to public works involvement and things like that. But there are other hard costs, and that aerial survey is a good example where you can expect that those requirements will have to come forward. BMPs, at some point we're going to have to do something. We're talking about, in generality, about $1,000 per acre of drainage area. That alone just computes to $1.6 million worth of improvements. And that's low. I mean, I can guarantee that number is probably low. So as you look at the individual areas where we have to put these things, we're talking about digging really big holes, really deep in the middle of streets. And that's difficult. So.
Excuse me, Engineer Rudolph.
Yes, sir.
Will they be using drones for the aerial surveys, or will that be a helicopter?
No, typically they use a fixed wing aircraft because the amount of camera. That technology is coming down the road though.
The reason I asked, I saw just a standard passenger plane flying very low earlier today.
Yeah, you could certainly see that
Become
coming
a
out.
survey of some sort. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
How do we fund it? Really, the two options that have kind of gained traction. Of course, you can just tax the individuals and fund it out of your general fund. That's always an option. Option 2 is a stormwater user fee. Essentially, you're going to charge individuals within the borough, and Hampton has implemented this type of concept. They charge a flat rate for residential units. I think it's in the $10 to $12 range per residential unit. Then the commercial occupancies get a sliding scale based on how much pavement and other things they have. So clearly, if you're a Walmart, you're getting hammered. So, and it's fair. I mean, it really is based on the amount of impervious area that they're concerned about. So that would be a fair thing. Other individuals have created a separate authority altogether to be able to deal with this. You could end up handing some of this over to your sewer department. The borough code allows you a little more flexibility in that regard. But for example, Derry Township is going to basically sell their entire system for $1 to their municipal authority to run and operate just because of this. So those are some things that can be coming down the road. So kind of in closing, we need to make plans for the future. This is not something that's going to go away. In fact, the prediction is it's going to kind of get worse to a certain extent, and we're going to continue to see rising costs. What I would like to do is kind of share two, I mentioned articles that have come out in the last, basically this is dated November the 5th. Federal regulators find major issues in DEP review. So EPA came in and kind of did an audit of DEP and how they're handling certain programs. And for all intents and purposes, there are certain national goals. For example, they said 80% or above, and DEP received a 0. So I can only imagine that in the future, these regulatory agencies are going to start to get more and more hard on DEP, which in turn will come down to us. And then just this month, Supreme Court ends the challenge of the Chesapeake Bay cleanup. There was a significant class action lawsuit filed against, basically it was the federal government challenging the Chesapeake Bay. And what ended up happening is the Supreme Court ruled that the Chesapeake Bay, entities essentially, and EPA has the ability to regulate this stuff. They essentially struck down a lot of individuals, individual interests like farmers and things like that that have joined in on this lawsuit. So they've said, that the highest court in Atlanta said this is legal to do. So, I think that's been in the works for a long time since we kind of started this thing. That's just come to resolution, but it just provides that exclamation point on the fact that as we move into the future, there's going to be more coming down the road. Certainly, I think that meets our obligation under our permit for the annual update with respect to that. If there's any additional public comment, we will welcome that at this point in time. But other than that, we can look forward to more in the 2017, 2018 timeframe as we learn more as it comes down the road.
Greg, do you think where they're charging the residents for the storm sewer, do you think that would be something we should consider prior to actually needing it, so we don't have to make it such a high rate?
Yes. I think right now we're kind of in the mode that we've identified what those, what the potential costs are. As projects come along, Legacy Park's a good example. We're working with them collaboratively to be able to, install one of these storm scepters, at some point in their system so that, we would pay for the material they put it in. So there's savings to us in being able to do that. So we have the roadmap at this point in time, but really beyond that, we're hoping that maybe if this nutrient credit thing comes along and, we have a storm scepter here and a couple of little other projects, maybe we can absorb some of those costs. But, once it becomes clear, and I think that's going to be that 2017, 2018 timeframe, that, it's just like anything else. You want to charge people, $5 for a couple of years and kind of build that bank up until we're forced to do something, or should we whack them all at once?
Well, it appears that we're going to be forced to do something.
Yeah.
I think really what we need to do is consider the fact that raising that fee, making that fee like a minimum $5 fee for each resident, and we bank that into a special account just for this particular type of situation.
Yeah, I think that is specifically what EPA and DP are looking for, that you have those plans and those financial plans in place and money's set aside to do that. And the other component of that is when things come along, when opportunities come along, and I'll give you a good example. If PennDOT comes back and says, hey, we're going to pave Market Street, we have storm sewer issues in Market Street. We would be in a position then to actually be able to do a little bit more than a Band-Aid at that point in time, and maybe integrate some of these components into that. But yeah, I think it's something, and the number is the tough part. Without knowing the end game at this point,
Right.
What do we charge them? I don't know. Clearly Hampton's population is greater than ours, so, perhaps the boroughs will be much higher. I'm not sure at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think it's something definitely to keep in the back of your mind. And as budget season comes, we've said it before, but it's going to get worse.
Greg, you had shared that, and I may have been confused by how it came about, but that Terry Township was going to sell, the sewer authority to another authority for $1?
Yeah, so
And what are the advantages of that?
So basically, Derry Township proper owned the storm sewer system. They had a completely separate municipal authority. And the advantage to them was really, the sewer authority has experience in dealing with these permits and being compliant and things like that, whereas the road crew really didn't have that experience, the townships have. So, of course they work very closely, their financing is all tied together, so for them to be able to transfer those assets and just put them in kind of the hands of the best people who run the system is what it came down to. That's what they chose to do. They had they've done a number of stormwater projects in the recent past and had, some debt associated with it too as well. I don't know how that all worked itself out in the deal, if you will, but they just, I think, felt that they were the better people to deal with.
So it was strictly a management issue. They didn't get any benefit from being able to change the rules in any way?
No, I think they were washing their hands at the end of the day and basically saying, hey, we can deal with the people that kind of are used to it.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The big wet marshy,
Yes,
mosquitoes,
yes.
health concerns. There's something running the country that now has rather devastating aspects.
Yeah, and part of that's the design of them. There are design elements of how deep you make the water, keeping the water moving, things like that, so that it tries to eliminate or reduce, is probably a better word, the formation of mosquitoes and not create those types of things.
And One other thing to consider, suggest basically you do your own research. New York versus the United States, 1992. Conclusion, the federal government, we held, may not compel the states to enact or administer a federal regulatory program. If you need help with it, see me.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, Roger, thank you very much. Thank you. Very good, thank you. Do we have any citizen comments or requests at this time? Are there any additions to the agenda? We need a motion for the approval of the agenda as it is.
So moved.
The motion's been made. Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Have any correspondence?
No, sir.
We need a motion for approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on March 1st, 2016.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Manager report.
I spoke with Craig at the highway department today about the street sweeping schedule. And I just wanted to remind everyone that back in the fall, when we were talking about the sweeper, we decided that we were having an abridged schedule this year, since we were going to have the current sweeper repaired and try to limit the use. So they'll be sweeping in the next couple of weeks the entire borough once, but then they're gonna be sweeping the downtown as needed instead of twice a week. And then in the fall, they're going to come back and sweep the whole borough again.
We're gonna have to change the signage for.
No, we're gonna leave the signs up since this is a trial year to see how it goes. And at the staff meeting on Thursday, we'll discuss how we're gonna implement that with the police department so that people are not getting ticketed. You know, we'll have to do some public outreach for that. Also, I talked to our auditors, Hamilton and Musser, this week about completing the 2015 audit. They will be done by the deadline, however, Buyer Barber will not be done with the Gadsby 34 piece, which is the extended pension liabilities, which we have to have done every 3 years. So Hamilton and Musser will be applying for an extension until Buyer Barber finishes their piece of the audit, and then they'll be filing our DCD reports as usual. They will have a draft audit in advance of the Gadsby 34 for council to look at. And I just want to let everyone know that the PC meeting scheduled for March 28th is canceled as they have no agenda items this month. I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Curtis Huey. He is the Assistant Superintendent at the SERV plant. He is filling in for Ron Adams tonight, who is under the weather. And he's here for the agenda item regarding the capacity for the Legacy Park project.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Mayor?
Good evening, thank you. February 18th, attended the Harrisburg Regional Chamber and Capital Region Economic Development Corporation Open House at Cordier Auction, Harrisburg. 20th, Washington Fire Company No. 1 held their 158th anniversary banquet for the Mechanicsburg Club. Good food, informational program. March 12th, Sea Park celebration, Cumberland Ferry Association for Retarded Citizens, held at the Otterbein United Methodist Church, Carlisle, assisted with the award ceremony. 14th Crime Watch guest was Sue Urban from the Joseph T. Simpson Public Library. She talked about how the library helps local families and students to develop good learning skills. 15th attended the PSAB information breakfast at Lemoyne with Acting Chief Mindy Myers. There's sheets on the back table. Input. Hearings regarding the proposed rate increase request for UGI utilities, and that there are invitations there on the counter back there. Anybody interested? I have the 32 Years of Service Award. Mechanicsburg Police Department and the Borough of Mechanicsburg wish to acknowledge and thank you for your service to our community. Completing each year of service is a milestone in your career that shows dedication and commitment. Wish you success and satisfaction in your continuing honorable service with the borough. 32 years of service presented to Margaret Myers. Thank you for your dedicated service.
Did that include her years as park police?
And last, the trivia question. In the 1860s, did the Confederates use the Cumberland Valley Railroad to get to Harrisburg?
Yes, yes.
Who said that?
Who said what, no?
They did, and this is the explanation. In June of 1862, Mechanicsburg residents saw their first of the Civil War, when 450 Confederate prisoners passed through on the Cumberland Valley Railroad to the Union Stockade in Harrisburg. And this question came from the Mechanicsburg Museum Association. So the answer said yes. Come up. Oh. I thought it was one of the scouts did that. You said yes.
Yeah, he did.
All right, you see me after the meeting. Like, you get a prize. I get a ride in the train. That's the report.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief?
I have an agenda item.
Okay. Solicitor?
Yes, Mr. President, just by way of housekeeping, the agreement with the school district concerning the pool management, that's been chopped off by the school district. The revisions were made with communication to the solicitor for the school district. It's come back now for signing. There's no action to be taken now. This council had had conditionally approved the agreement. I just wanted to let you know that it came back in-house for signature. Also reviewing and working with Mr. Rogowski and crew with the review for the sewer easement for Landmark for the Legacy Park development. And there's been a discussion, I believe, with Engineer Rogowski concerning the Cumberland Valley development, the release of the escrow fund. That's an agenda item for later. And a report.
Thank you. Right, or Greg?
I think I've worn out my welcome tonight.
No, that's fine. You did a good job. Thank you. Actually, you didn't have, it wasn't boring at all. I enjoyed it. Fire Chief.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple quick items. Attended the Consolidation Finance Committee meeting. Also attended the Borough Highway, or not Highway, but Department Head meeting. Also attended the MSR or MS4 meeting and representing the fire department and what we do on simple things of automobile accidents and trucks and making sure that the runoff doesn't get into our storm sewers. Held a Borough Fire Officers meeting, investigated 2 open burnings, one in the 100 block of South Market Street, and the second was in the 500 block of West Main Street. And I would just ask the general public to consider when they're using your gas grills, do not put them or leave your gas grills on the porch nor in your garage. We had a person, a call here within the last couple of weeks, decided they were going to start their grill up on their back porch under the roof. Gas grill caught on fire, and we were fortunate, got the fire out before it did any serious damage to the structure. So just ask that, and that's all I have. Thank you.
With the chief's comments, Greg, that brings up a question I just thought about with MS4. Is the borough responsible in any way on a traffic scene? And I know you said the fire department has special exemption there, but are we responsible in any way for a catastrophe scene that?
Yes, and I think we're covered to a certain extent because there's insurance in place, you know, that if there were to be, say, a discharge that ended up in the North Side Basin, that contamination would be covered under the auto carrier's insurance. So we are responsible. You know, if they didn't do it, we would have to, you know, theoretically do it and then probably proceed against somebody. But yeah, it does ultimately all fall.
And does the borough have an insurance policy to cover that type of thing? I mean, if the,
It would be covered
Auto-
under our general liability policy
Okay.
should we incur any.
I think what you're talking about is like a tank truck.
I mean, anything
Yeah,
like that.
and all that stuff would
Gasoline,
be down the
diesel
scoreboard.
fuel,
Yeah,
chemicals from a storage building somewhere.
Councilman, if I could,
Yeah.
just on a general, shouldn't say general traffic accident, but a minor traffic accident where we have fluids and things like that. Several months or even years ago, we started, rather than having what they would call a wash down, where we would come out and wash everything off the street and into the storm drain. What we're doing now is we're using high dry, we're putting it down, we're sweeping it up, we're scooping it up, and we're putting it in contractors' bags, and we're sending it along with the vehicle when it's being removed from the scene, so that those particles or those articles are going to be disposed of with what other material as a result of the accident. And we are reporting that in our fire report. We've talked with the engineer that on a quarterly or annual basis, we will be reporting that off of our fire reports so that we're in compliance with the MS4.
And I mean, I knew the fire departments were doing their share. I meant before they got there, I mean, if they were just overwhelmed with
Yeah.
tanker truck or.
Typically, the
something.
hazmat team would be involved, any spill over 50 or 55 gallons, DEP gets notified. So, they're gonna be engaged, but yeah, I think it does bring up a good point that, we would.
And when the chief said that, it just, something went off in my head.
agenda items.
Discussion and possible action to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the application of Pete Procopio, 141 East Main Street for roof replacement.
Make that motion.
Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action to approve the application of Raymond and Crystal Jones, 113 East Simpson Street for temporary lattice on their front porch.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action to renumber the resolution passed to rescind capacity on the February 16th meeting from Resolution 03-2016 to Resolution 04-2016. Inadvertently, we had 2 threes, so we just want to clean that up.
So moved.
Motion been made,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action to adopt Resolution 05-2016 approving the Legacy Park Planning Module as part of the Borough's Act 537 plan. We do have representatives from Legacy Park here this evening if anyone has any questions.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action to adopt Resolution 06-2016 in honor of Darwin Hollinger's service to the Recreation Commission. This was requested by the Shade Tree Commission. I'm sorry, Shade Tree Commission, not Recreation Commission. It was requested by the Shade Tree.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action on permanent status for Patrol Officer Ethan Paulus, effective March 9th, 2016.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion? Doing well?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action on the financial security reduction for Mechanicsburg Commons.
So moved.
Motion been made,
Second.
seconded. Now we have some discussion.
Well,
Yep.
go ahead.
Okay, so this is a little bit different animal than we're used to, and this, if you recall, is the Mechanicsburg Commons project. It was really around in 2002. It has since been partially constructed. We ended up last year pulling the bond from the bank because the individual and the corporation that was responsible for that particular project had went bankrupt. So we currently have $103 plus or minus $1,000 sitting in escrow in our accounts. We have the cash. So a little bit different scenario where typically a developer comes forward and asks for a reduction to his bond. as, things progress, this individual came back to the borough with a request to reduce the amount that we currently have in the bank. And the reason for that, it's a legitimate reason. When we pulled the bond, we basically took everything we could get. We took the whole $103,000. When in reality, he actually had done additional work in that time period since we had last reduced the bond 10 years ago, long time ago. So we believe the memo that we provided, there's a number related to $62,810.78. We believe that's a reasonable number to hold based on what's left to do. However, there's a little bit of a nuance here. Right now, we have the money in the bank, we're in the driver's seat. And this, in my mind, is not necessarily regulated in the same way that we would regulate a reduction of regular financial security. We have no idea if this individual, we don't want to have to do that work. We really don't want to get involved in that. The fear is eventually, if he doesn't do it, or somebody doesn't pick it up and do it themselves, i.e. another developer, that, the residents that would band together and basically, come against the borough and force us to take the streets over. We want to have enough money in the bank to be able to deal with that everything down the road. But if we reduce it too much, and this drags on for another 10 years, $62,000 may not be good enough to pave the street in 10 years.
In 10 years, that won't be enough.
Exactly. So it's a gamble, and it's not. I don't have some good guidance because I don't know that I don't know we can have a crystal ball. I think the positive of this conversation is we had a developer come in that seems interested, a reputable individual that wanted to potentially look at buying the remainder of the lots. It would be nice to get that particular thing finished, but at the same time, like I said, the risk is there that if we were to reduce the bond, that as we proceed down the road, whether it's 2 years, 10 years, 50 years, who knows what's going to happen with respect to paving the street. And that really is the biggest item left, is to pave the street.
And who gets the money, the original builder?
We would refund it, good question, back to the bank, because the bank is the one we took it from.
Okay.
And it would be refunded in the name of the bank as well as the developer, which is actually a corporation.
The new developer or the old
The
developer?
old developer.
Okay.
The other scenario that we're kind of hoping happens is a new developer comes in. He's talked about potentially taking, there's a bunch of duplex lots there, combining those duplex lots together and making single-family dwellings through a subdivision plan. At that point, we told him that we would request he post the financial security to finish the subdivision. And frankly, we'll give it back, West Tabor, whatever he has, whatever we have in the bank. Now we have another financial security instrument in our possession.
But only once we get that.
Exactly. So.
I mean, we're not giving West Tabor all that money back and then say, well, this guy doesn't want it now, so now we're stuck.
And what I don't know, you want to be fair in respect to the fact that, yes, we're probably holding more, if we pave the street tomorrow, we're holding more money than we would normally. However, we're also obligated to give whatever's left over back to them. So it's not like a third party, person is out there just holding on to this money and we're going to profit off of it. We would refund, once we did the work, we would be obligated to refund whatever was left.
Can we refund it less than he's asking for?
Absolutely. Well, this is less, first of all. He asked for like $50,000. We said, no, we need at least $60,000 because there was a retainer.
No, that's what we're keeping.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're refunding $40,000. You're right. I went the other way. So, yeah, we could refund $10,000. We could refund $20,000. And, where we grab that number from, that would be completely out of the sky. So, an interesting caveat we don't really run into it very often.
Since we're in the driver's seat, wouldn't it make the most sense to hold on to everything we have now and see where we're at the end of the project if we have to step in and do anything?
It would.
Because I can't see 62,000 doing the paving up there.
So what we did, we projected the numbers, the current, like bid numbers that we received last year for that particular area, and that comes up to like $35,000. So it is actually greater than what that would cost.
And that would take up those two streets up there.
Yeah.
Now, they're already, the base is
Yeah,
already.
Yeah, it's just where
It's just the top coat.
Yeah, it would finish coat.
Yeah, exactly. So, so really, like I said, the bulk of the improvements have been completed.
So the only thing outstanding is the blacktop?
There's some other things. There's some screening, there's some stabilization of the lots, but those really are they're on private property.
What about the water runoff into the ponding area?
Basin's been constructed, it would need maintained, we held money for the maintenance of that, if that were to come to that issue, so yes.
So if I heard you right, it was $35,000 is going to be the cost to bring it all up?
That's just the paving, the $62,000 we believe is the cost of everything together, and that includes a certain amount of what we call retainage on the original. We just added 5% on the original estimate. So there's fluff of about $10,000, if you will, in that estimate as well.
The only problem I have with that whole thing is if anything doesn't come along, we're sitting there, we funded him $40,000 and now we gotta go out and do everything. It's, like I said, $62,000 may not pay everything in the next 7 to 10 years, if nothing else comes along.
And that's the problem, we don't know whether
We
it's
don't
gonna be
know, that's
7
a
or 10
problem.
years. And
That's why I'm a problem.
you know, if we wait 10 years, the cost of doing that will be much greater
Right.
than $60,000.
Yeah, we looked back in the original estimate in 2002, you know, that price to pave is doubled, so in that time period, so, you know, clearly it could happen again.
How far down the road is the potential new developer?
We've met, I don't know, Roger, if you have any further communication with them since the meeting.
They're discussing, you know, specifics at this point in time. I don't know if they've made any progress, so, I mean, there's been, the realtor that's representing Mr. Westhafer and the developer have met outside of the meeting that we had with them, but I don't know.
But we don't know what happened here.
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to.
Nor we control it.
Yeah. Lisa, can we withdraw that motion legally?
If you want to, you can do two things. You can vote on that, you had a motion and a second, or you can entertain a motion to table that. Those will be the two options.
Motion.
Question before you do that.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think? What do you think? Common standard practice in this kind of situation, are you recommending that we do this, or are you recommending that we not do it? What are your thoughts?
My only fear is if somebody came back, and I honestly don't believe that Mr. Westhaver has the ability, or not the ability, I don't think he would do this, but he could say, well, you guys are holding more money than you guys have more money in the bank than what it's gonna take to finish it. And if that's the case, if we were come to be pushed like that, my response would be like, fine, we'll pave the street tomorrow and be done with it. Because it's gonna cost more money for us to do it than anything else, you know, eye for an eye type thing.
I'm sure our residents would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, so, but the piece of the puzzle, you wanna work with him, because at the end of the day, you know, he still owns the physical underlying property, he hasn't dedicated it to us. So we'd have to go through a condemnation to actually take the right of way, and that gets to be an entire mess. I think part of our thought process was, can we show some goodwill towards this new developer as well, to try to provide some motivation related to him coming in.
How do you feel about the King Solomon approach?
So, meaning,
What if we split the bacon? Give them 20 grand instead of 40.
yeah, I think it would show some incentive for economic development, maybe get somebody else in there to actually get the project. Because part of the thought was that the new developer could work with the bank to obtain the financing. The bank would have an interest if we did refund some of their money to be a player at the table, and things like that.
But
So,
if we get a new developer in there, we can still go ahead and do this at that time, can't we?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think it's a complete, like I said, there's no good guidance. You know, I certainly would not hold what he asked for, that 50,000 he asked for, I would not do that. The lowest I would go would be this, you know, 62,000.
I kinda like John's idea, let's give him 20.
Show good faith.
Show good faith that we're gonna give you, you're gonna get your money back, but not all at one time till we figure out what's going on.
And to address Councilman Winchell's, as far as the refunding, because we pulled it from the LOC, a letter of credit from Integrity, which is now S&T Bank, any refunding of this escrowed cash account will be issued payable to the two entities, S&T Bank and Cumberland Valley Development, Inc., and let them duke it out as far as who gets it. My fear is that we issue it to one, the other one says they're entitled to it, so we will make it payable, whatever amount, if there is any, payable to entities, and they will like I said, duke it out. So if,
Can we withdraw that motion? Who made that motion?
I did.
And my second.
I'll withdraw.
You gonna withdraw that motion? You withdraw your second? Can we do that legally?
you're going to amend a different amount, is that what I
Yeah,
what I
I
heard?
think that's what we're gonna do.
So we have a motion to amend for a dollar amount of what would be retained then. Is what I think you want to, we want to couch that in terms of what the amount to be kept.
If we were giving him 40, I believe what he's suggesting is give him 20.
It's 41 over 50.
Well, 20.
Yeah, you want to just go to the flat 20?
It's, yeah, actually, it turns out to be you would retain, if you gave him 20 back, you would retain $83,862.60.
I make that motion.
Motion been made.
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action on a reduced swim pass rate for the Mechanicsburg Swim Club for the 2016 season, as recommended by the Recreation Board.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Motion been made, seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Discussion and possible action on the placement of the Jeff Sealover Monument at Mechanicsburg Area Softball Association Field Number 5. The borough was asked to approve the location of this, which the rec board did review and recommend, because the borough leases that space from the school district and has to maintain the field. So the school referred Mr. Sealover's father to the borough for the placement of the marker at a convenient location. The rec board reviewed the style of marker that's to be placed and the location that is to be placed, and they're passing that recommendation on to you, and there was pictures in your packet.
So moved.
Motion been made. Seconded. One question, where is Field 5?
It is behind Gilbert Street.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
Glenn, I have a question in our packet, and I didn't print it out, so I don't have it with me. There was some discussion or notation about maintenance. That would not, I mean, that would just be maintenance around the thing, not maintenance if it's damaged or something like that.
Well, I would assume if it got spray painted with graffiti or whatever, we would have to clean that off, and we'd have to keep the area around the trim,
Okay.
just like we do with any other thing that is placed in the park.
Thank you.
Kind of building, anything that's placed there. Same level of maintenance.
We have a motion?
Yeah.
We have a motion, we have a second, and we have any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Approval of expenditures from February 1st, 2016 through February 29th, 2016.
So moved.
Motion been made.
Second.
Seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any citizens' comments? Any other business?
I'm sorry, citizen comment,
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, regarding which issue?
Anything.
Oh, okay, well, I'm just, as a person who has business and employment interests also.
I can't hear you. Come up here and state your name and address, please.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Stark. I'm a longtime resident of this area. I actually grew up in Des Moines and I've lived in this area for a while.
Live where at, sir? What is your home address?
Actually, in Harrisburg right now, but
In Harrisburg?
Yes, but my concern is the road safety issues, which affects everybody, whether in a car or a bicycle. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with House Bill 170, which is a bicycle safety bill that was passed in 2012. And I have not seen any signs out there on this narrow roadways, which other communities have addressed. And the reason I say that, I've had some near tragedies as commuting as a bicyclist.
Do you commute to the borough of Mechanicsburg?
I come through.
Do you live in the borough of
I come
Mechanicsburg?
through the area quite often, with employment and other business interests. And I just wondered if there was any plan to post any signage or to.
At this point in time, no.
To address
No.
the training issues.
Thank you.
Okay, I wondered about that. As I did forward a letter regarding that last year, and I never got a reply from either Borough Manager Dennis or the other folks who it was addressed to on the council. So I wondered what the reason was for that.
I can't answer that.
If there was no.
I don't recall that letter.
a reply. Well, I have copies of this on the email. I wondered why there was no reply to the inquiry about the personal safety procedures, and also for the issues where there may be some bullying in the community. I've witnessed people being bullied, and I wonder what the rules are locally and statewide, what the rules are for people who may be treated differently at certain businesses in town. So
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have a question, sir. You had said about the signs being posted in other municipalities. Can you give us an example where they're at so we can take a look at them?
I'm sorry, which times? Reese?
Never mind.
I have a copy of, yes, I do. I do have a copy of it here. If you'd like to take a look at it.
Any other?
I'm good.
This is what I was referring to.
Excuse me.
Where might I see one of those signs in use so I can get a
There is
feeling
one-
what you're
there is
talking
one
about?
in Camp Hill, and they
Where?
have one from the bicycle shop.
Where at
actually.
Camp Hill? In front of
There's
homes?
one from
Bicycle
Homes.
shop.
It's very
Okay.
hard to see them.
Okay.
Very hard to see them.
Okay.
This is who it was yesterday, and as I mentioned, I did.
Okay,
I'll take it.
I just want to know where.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
So I
Take
can
a
see
seat,
where
please.
it's at.
Okay, great. I'll just discuss the police report issue also, discuss this privately.
Thank you.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, you can have it back. You bet. You can have it back.
Every copy of it.
I don't need it. That's not made to me.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Glenda, any more?
Nothing.
Chief?
No.
Jack?
Nothing.
Gary?
Nothing.
I think Dairy Queen's giving free ice cream. If you can get there before it closes.
Kyle? Mark?
Just a reminder, this Saturday is East Drake Hunt at the Park from 11 to 11:02 probably. So,
All right, thank you.
The executive session is planned, there may be possible action to be taken.
Okay.
Nothing, thank you.
Rick?
No, sir.
We are going to adjourn to an executive session on matter of potential litigation, and there may be some action.